Hey everyone, this is Sarab. Thank you so much for joining. We'll be starting shortly in a minute. We have a really jam packed session, so please do keep commenting on any questions, any feedback, any areas you'd like us to dive deeper into, and hang in there for another few seconds. I am gonna run the slideshow here. All right. And I'm hoping that you guys can hear me. I also joined through my phone so I can read the comments. So if you want to just put in comment if you're not able to hear or if something isn't working, let me know. We will start since it's already 2 o'clock. So here goes. Thank you so much for joining. We have a jam packed agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about AI in Salesforce, a very simplistic version of what it means. And then we will dive right into prompt engineering fundamentals. What does it mean to really write good prompts? What does the life cycle of prompt look like, especially when you think about going from early stage proof of concept and pilots into a production? What does that entail? And from there, we'll jump a little bit into tips and tricks where Rahul, my colleague, would support us and he will talk a little bit more about a lot of these prompt engineering areas that we found through really just working in the trenches here. And then we'll dive into prompt types. What are some good examples of prompts that you can think about from a Salesforce perspective? What kind of use cases do they solve? We'll also dive a little bit into the examples of how do you write those prompts? What can you think about when you're writing them? What's the kind of output that you can see? Then we'll touch briefly on the enhancing effectiveness of prompts. How do you bring things like localization? We'll talk about RAG models and how you can benefit from that. A little bit about if you want to do file analysis through prompts from inside Salesforce. And then we'll jump into a bit on the grounding rules, a little bit on ethical and content consideration, a little bit on security, things like that, and then Q&A. So please keep asking your questions in the comments. My colleagues are on this webinar as well. They can answer it in comments, and we will definitely get to Q&As as well as we get into the content. So with that, let's jump right in. My name is Saurabh Gupta. I'm the angry guy in the photo there. I'm one of the co-founders of GPT-5. I spent about 6-7 years at Salesforce prior to co-founding GPT-5 and Cloud Compliance. We are a Salesforce App Exchange partner. By profession, I'm an enterprise architect based in Chicago. And in the last 5 years, we have been very blessed by having an incredible lineup of customers who appreciate what we do. A little bit on what we do, and then we'll jump right into the content. We are the authors of GPT-5, an App Exchange native app, which basically lets you bring your own AI and run it right from inside Salesforce. So you can enable AI for your business. We have a built-in prompt engineering platform focused on usability and adoption. We have a natively built security and trust layer that you can leverage to enhance security and privacy policies. And essentially, you can deploy AI across the enterprise. A lot of the conversation today is informed by our work with our customers. We'll also talk about a lot of capabilities that you can benefit from. But fundamentally, prompt engineering is prompt engineering is prompt engineering, right? Whether you do it with the AI cloud, whether you do it with GPT-5, you do it with some other tool, it really doesn't matter. Bottom line is you're trying to make sure that you can deliver value to your business, to your customer, to your employers. And that's kind of what we are focused on. So, with that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about prompt engineering fundamentals and really just what are we talking about here when you think about the intersection of technology and business value. So, the idea here is to focus on business productivity. So this conversation on prompt engineering is not talking about how to write, generate Apex code or something else from say from AI. So it's not about developer productivity. We will dive deeper into how could you address common use cases for sales and service cloud, and really get into sort of advanced prompt writing, prompts that really can go to production, that actually solve your end user problem. And they are non-trivial prompts. Most of them are. And basically, we are a bring your own AI model architecture product. So a lot of what we're talking about applies to OpenAI or Anthropic Claude or Llama or Google Vertex or anything else that you're using, OpenAI on Azure. And the idea is that you see a wide variety of these prompts and how they were written. And the hope is that you can walk away from here with a good understanding of what it takes, how to think about it, and help your employers, help your clients if you're in consulting and things like that. So, with that out of the way, let's just talk about what it is. At a fundamental level, it's really three simple steps, right? You're extracting some data out of Salesforce, maybe masking it, applying some security on it. You're sending a prompt to AI along with that data. You get better response, and you display or update data in Salesforce with that response. Pretty simple, right? Let's talk a little bit more in depth into what this life cycle really entails. So if you think about the prompt lifecycle, it actually doesn't start with extracting data or writing prompt. It starts with understanding the purpose, right? What is the business use case? What is the ROI? What is the expected outcome? As commonsensical as it sounds, you would be surprised at how many of these things are done by people who are actually not at all thinking about the legit business case. You have to do that because what we are seeing is so much of AI gets discredited as it's, FOMO, it's just hype, it's not real. I've seen a lot of online stuff about Microsoft Copilot and some of these other offerings. The fundamental point is if the business use case is missing, all of this is rather pointless. Once you identify a business use case, then you can think about the prompt aspect of it, right? What is the sort of command for AI processing? What's the format of output we are expecting from AI? Do we need to do grounding around it? Things like that. And this is what our area of focus primarily is going to be today as we dive into it. The third part of this is what data do we have that actually aligns well with that prompt and to that purpose. They may be in standard object, custom object, managed package objects. They may be in standard or custom fields, all of that information. And this is a very fundamental difference when you think about doing prompt engineering. You may not have to be a developer for this. You're actually better served in this if you're a really sharp admin or a business analyst who understands how these fields are used, how these objects are used on the business side. So having greater business context is actually more important than the underlying technical context for this. Anyway, if you understand that, you can identify the data context, the security and masking requirements, what information are we sending, what are we withholding inside Salesforce, things like that. You then want to test and optimize. This step is crucial because prompts tend to behave differently with different AI models. So if you're using OpenAI on Azure versus Google Vertex, you'll get different results. You have to constantly validate results, particularly if you have a bring your own model architecture and you may have different models you're working with, which is something we support, right? The other part of this is in addition to validating the result, this is a very iterative process. You'll do something, the result kind of looks good, you'll tweak it. You'll do it again. For the same prompt, you may get different results. So you may add a lot of grounding to make sure that, a lot of that result is fairly predictable, right? And that tweaking and data and prompts and grounding is the heart of some of this. And I know Rahul is going to talk a little bit in his tips and tricks about that. Finally, once it's working, you want to publish it to your users. And the idea here is you want it to be able to deploy it based on users, based on their profiles, based on record types. You want to catalog them, kind of have versioning around it, make sure that you are doing a very production grade version of it. These are some areas that a lot of people glaze over today because they go, oh, yeah, we'll do that right now. We're just POCing it. But a lot of our customers are in production or actively marching towards production. And these are things that they think about. They want to have an extreme degree of control in management and administration of these prompts. And finally, how do you track the ROI and usage? Can you track how much time it's saved, how much money it's saved your users, who are your power users, which are the most well-used prompt, things like that. And we have built instrumentation around that. We have ROI dashboards and stuff. But the point is, regardless of, again, what solution you use, these are things you want to think about from a holistic standpoint on prompt lifecycle. With that out of the way, and finally, this is kind of the Kaizen idea, right? Like constant improvement. So you have something, you look at usage, you identify gaps, you optimize, innovate, so you keep iterating on it. So that's the idea. We do all of those things, all of the things that are here in GPT-5 if you're interested. But we'll move on and talk more about prompts and things like that. So I will hand over with that to Rahul. Rahul, take it away.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Saurabh. Give me a thumbs down if you can't hear me, or a thumbs up, whatever is the option, if you can hear me all right. Uh, so I'm based out of Minneapolis. It's beautiful. It's 76-degree Fahrenheit here. I want to just get out after this call. I am a product guy, so I own GPT-5 product. As Saurabh mentioned, we are on App Exchange. You might want to check us out. I am a solution architect, problem solver, and based out of Minneapolis, which I mentioned earlier. So moving on, Saurabh, do you want to get on the next slide? All right, so we're going to talk tips and tricks. So these are tips and tricks that I have learned based on the past 2 years since we have been engaged with the AI and specifically large Salesforce customers, complex requirements. So I'm going to share some of the things that I think are, lessons learned that were very, very painful for us, and then we found those. So the first one, and again, a lot of things we are going to talk about are very, they're very agnostic, AI agnostic, which means that they are applicable to OpenAI as much as to Google Gemini or Llama or whichever other AI you are using. So the first one I'm going to talk about is recency bias. So most of the LLMs have recency bias, which basically means that they are looking at your prompt, they're scanning your prompt from top to bottom, and when they are parsing top to bottom, anything that is at the bottom of the prompt, it gets higher weightage. And sometimes you have to use it in your advantage. Like in my personal experience, I was writing a prompt where I wanted AI to generate a HTML table, and I wanted the HTML table to have, like, black, solid black borders and all that, and it was not doing. It was hit and a miss. And then after a very, very long time, I kind of realized that about recency bias, and I moved this instructions to the bottom, and then it started to work. I also have found that sometimes you have to repeat the instructions and you have to say the same instruction multiple times, and that also helps. I don't know if that's same as recency bias, but just sharing some of the tricks. So if you built a prompt and it works 8 out of 10 times and out of 10 it does not, try to leverage what you're finding with recency bias and see if you can take advantage of that. I'll have some screenshots after this, so I'll actually show you some more information about recency bias, just some of my examples. Moving on, JSON prompts. So AI loves JSON. Like, it's like really the, like, it understands it like the back of its hand. And when you are sending JSON as extract from Salesforce, and if let's say you are extracting account and cases and case comment and opportunities and opportunity product distributions and all of those things, like 3 4 level JSONs, lots of records, it's very important that you actually send the record IDs, the 18-digit Salesforce IDs, and also send the parent IDs. So if you are at the case or case comment level, then at the case comment level, send the parent ID of the case. And when you start sending those, you again realize that sometimes your prompts become more trustworthy, because then they start to always give you better results. You can almost guarantee that they will give you a result. And again, I was not doing that because I was trying to be someone used a term as token conscious business analyst. So I was very token conscious, and I was like, you know what? I want to write prompts and send information, which is absolutely important. And therefore, I was not sending IDs. But then I realized that sending IDs is actually very beneficial. So I would recommend that if you are writing JSON prompts and sending JSON, then you must send the record IDs, the 18-digit IDs, and also the parent IDs. Moving on, we're going to talk about few shot learnings. So few shot learnings is something that all AIs understand. And what you can do is you can share your own perspective, your own point of view of how you want AI to predict. And you can actually influence based on your few shot learnings. And your few shot learning is really in the prompt. You're basically saying few short examples, and then you give example 1 2 3 4, and you also give how you want AI to interpret, or what does it need to get out of that example. When you do that, AI understands it, and when it understands it, you're actually influencing the prediction that AI is going to do. So that's few shot learnings. Again, I'm going to share some screenshots. You should see that. The next one is hashtag don't know hashtag. So that's my favorite. And the reason I got into that situation was because I was building a root cause analysis prompt for a very large customer. And I realized that when I'm running this root cause analysis prompt, sometimes some of the cases would be like, a user opened a case, and then the support agent responded, but user did not do anything with that, and the case after some time got closed. So there is no root cause. All we know, there is a problem, but we don't know what actually resolved it. And in those situations, I found that when you run the root cause analysis prompt, it was actually just giving some random things, reading through the case information. So it was somewhat related, but it is really not the reason why the case was resolved. So then, I started giving hashtag don't know in my, prompt. And I explicitly told AI that if you can't find a real reason, which is actually the resolution for the case, then return me hashtag don't know. And it's very powerful, because if you really think about, from, if you're operationalizing these things, automating all these things, you are running through API, you are updating, like, you are running AI for hundreds of cases that are getting closed every day, then you need that AI actually sends you hashtag don't know hashtag, because then in your Apex or in your flow, you can say, if I'm getting this, then don't update the case. Then moving on, the next thing is about privacy. So I know everyone talks, all the companies are very privacy conscious, especially when it comes to AI, and everyone wants to be on the safer side on that. What And at GPT-5, we are very we have our own security layer, so we mask everything, and we don't have any data retention. But there is data retention on the AI side. So when you call out AI, there is data retention, whether you're talking about OpenAI on Azure, OpenAI itself, or GCP. They all have their retention, and they have retention for a good reason. They want to make sure that you are using AI for ethical use. And what you need to do is, you need to fill up an application, request them, log a case saying that, hey, you need zero data retention. And when you do that, if they can qualify that, or whitelist you, then they stop doing data retention. So it's one of those things you want to understand, is it really critical for your business? Because, and if it is, then you want to log a case with your AI provider and get zero data retention. So that is about tips and tricks. Or if you want to move on, I have some screenshots that I want to further discuss. Okay. So here's the recency bias. So if you look at it, I have, this screenshot where I have, two red boxes. So you will see that I'm saying an HTML table with border equal to 1. And then again, I am saying the same thing at the bottom of the prompt. And when you do that, you suddenly realize that now AI is more consistent, and you are getting the results that you are expecting 10 out of 10 times, which is the biggest problem with AI, that AI is so undeterministic, non-deterministic, that sometimes, you realize that 9 times out of the 10 it works, but once it does not. But these are some of the things that I have, in my experience, they have worked really well for me. Moving on, the next is a JSON prompt. So you can see, like, on the left side, I have a prompt, and you can see I'm explicitly writing return response in the following parsable JSON format. So my prompt itself is very, very, typecasted. I'm saying exactly, this is how I want the result to be: a summary and a sentiment, and what is the description of the summary and the sentiment, and all of that. And then on the right hand side, you will see that I'm actually sending Salesforce data, which is actually, it's upside down. So case is at the bottom and case comment is at the top. But you will see that I have the IDs, and I have the parent ID on the case comment and ID of the case comment. So that's what I was saying, that anytime you are sending JSON data from Salesforce, make sure, if you have a lot of complex data structure, you're sending 3 level deep, 4 level deep information, and you're sending lots of records, then it is very important to start, send parent IDs and IDs. And then you can also see my AI response, which is the third snippet over here. So this is the AI response I got. And again, because it's in JSON, it's very easy to consume it in Apex. You can naturally parse it. You can update fields on the cases, sentiment on the cases, product, whatever you are doing. Moving on. All right. So few short learning. So again, a screenshot here. This is a prompt where we are asking AI to write an email in Saurabh's tone, in how Saurabh writes it. And so what we have done is we have given a few short examples, we have given a few short learning examples to AI, and we are saying this is how Saurabh writes it. And what AI will do is, because AI can now see all of this, it can actually infer it, and it can build a, it'll know what your style is. And when Saurav will ask it to write an email, it will try to mimic this style, and you will get an email which is more in Saurav's style, and not, it won't smell of AI as much. Moving on. So that's zero data retention. I talked about it. You can reach out to your AI vendor, and they can enable zero data retention for you. Moving on. All right. Then those were all the tips and tricks. If you have questions, if you have anything, please put some comments on LinkedIn. I would be checking those comments after I hand over this thing to Saurabh in another 5 minutes. Saurabh, keep moving. We want to talk about types of prompts. So this is how you want to think about prompts. There are lots of different types of prompts, and this is like, this is not something that OpenAI is saying these are types of prompts. This is how we look at prompts when we look at requirements from our customers. So I see prompts as a scoring based prompt. Now, these are very interesting prompts. These are the prompts where, you have heard from customers where they will say, hey, show me the top 10 opportunities. I'm a sales guy. Tell me which are the top 10 opportunities I should be working on. So there are two ways of doing it. One, you extract all the 100, 1000, I don't know how many opportunities you have, and then send it to AI and say, okay, tell me which are the top 10. Bad idea, because of a lot of reasons. You're sending too much data. You may have 8,000, 16,000, 32,000. I don't know what token sizes you have. You may go against that. It's also not very good, because AI just gets too much data. You can time out a lot of other issues. A better approach is scoring based approach. What you can do is you can send only one opportunity, but then you send a lot of criterias, and then you ask AI for every criteria, if it matches, add a score to it, like maybe a one score of one. If and you're trying to really identify if there's a risk score and an urgency score, or on a case you are trying to get a sentiment score, and you come up with your own criteria, work with business, and put it all in your prompt and send it. Saurabh is going to show you this one, but in case of a case sentiment score, you can say if a customer has responded on a case, and if he is using, let's say, upper cases, then maybe it's he's angry, right? So give 1 point to that. If he is using threatening language, like, I'm going to cancel my subscription, give another point one to it. If he is saying that, he's preaching and he's saying you guys should run your business better and all of that, it's kind of, there's preaching in that, then give another point to it. So now what you're doing is you're generating a sentiment score, and because it is based on criteria, you are going to see that if you run the same case 5 times, you're probably going to get a similar score, maybe in the same neighborhood. And once you start getting those scores, and you really figure out what how those scores bands are, then based on those sentiment score, you can actually say that which are the cases that you want high priority, low priority, or medium priority. So scoring is actually helping you prioritization of cases, opportunity, or any record. Then there are coaching style prompts. A coaching style prompt is when you have lots of best practices, processes already defined, and your top sales guy can tell you that which opportunities we will win and we will lose, and he can tell you exactly why. Maybe because he looks at a prompt, an opportunity, and tells you that, hey, this is a 500,000 opportunity, and you're talking to, let's say, a business analyst. Maybe that's not going to close unless you're not talking to maybe at a VP level. Maybe there's not decision at that level. So those are the things you can write inside of your prompt, and all those best practices you can write, and then you can hand it over these prompts to your sales guys. So when they run these prompts against their opportunity, they're getting very prescriptive information what they should do, and it's all based on your own sales processes. It's all based on your own best practices. So those are coaching style prompts. Again, Saurabh is going to show some of these. Then you have content generation prompts. These are the prompts that we hear a lot. Generate an email for me, right? Or maybe generate a root cause analysis, or maybe summarize a case for me. So that's your content generation prompts. Those are the prompts that we all have seen, heard a lot. Then you have categorization prompts. These are very interesting prompts. These are the prompts that you may require for reporting purpose or assignment purpose. So if you get hundreds, thousands of email to cases every day, all you have is just a description, which is actually the email on the case. Now you don't know what is the language of the case, what is the product it is about. Is it really a billing? Is it about installation? Is it about access? What is it about? So those are really categorization prompt. You can run it, and with GPT-5 you can automate a lot of those things. If you get thousands of cases every day, it can just run it, or you can build your own. But the idea is that you're really looking at a case or an opportunity or a lead, and you're identifying some of the category for that particular record. Then you have surface up prompts. So those are interesting because you may have account, and then account has multiple opportunities, multiple cases. There's an account owner, he doesn't know what's going on, lots of cases, he doesn't look at cases. But you may want to surface up all of those things. You may want that AI actually looks up all the open cases, identifies the sentiment on them, rolls it up all the way to the accounts, so that now the person who owns the account, he really understands what kind of relationships we have. How are those relationships, in the sense like, are those rock solid right now? Is it shaky because maybe our cases are open for very very long time, and customer is frustrated, and you are working on a deal. You're not going to close that deal because customer is not happy with what you sold them before. So those are your surface up prompts. I am going to hand over back to Saurabh. Saurabh, take it over. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, Rahul. Thanks, everyone. Some very interesting questions came up. I think there was a bunch of questions around privacy and stuff like that. We'll talk about it a bit later, but let's dive a little bit into what some of these look like. So let's start with the scoring based prompt. So here is an example, and I may jump into Salesforce and show you this as well, but I want to just show you some screenshots first, right? So this is an example of cases, and what you see here are sentiment scores. And these scores have been calculated by AI, and basically, GPT-5 ran in the background. It evaluated these cases, the case comments on it, and based on that, based on certain criteria, it's given them a score, and then you can leverage that to do triage, case routing, case sentiment, kind of red account indicators, build your automation and early warning around it. So here is an example of how a prompt like this might be, right? As you can see in this, we are saying, hey, we have created this. And what you don't see here is the CRM data grounding, which is probably further down in this prompt, where you can say, look at case subject, look at the content of the case, look at the case comments. And for each of these things, assign them a score, right? Assign negative or a positive based on what what has been said on the case, and utilize that to actually score these. And the beauty of this is that you if the minute you get a score like this on your case record, you now have the ability to automatically drive significant amount of automation using that. So that's an example of a prompt where you're basically doing scoring of Salesforce records. I'm going to jump into another one which is really interesting, which is around coaching. Now, what you start to see is this is the heart of where generative AI can really help. I actually think that writing emails with generative AI is like, it's like trying to kill a mosquito with a cannon. It's just not the best use case in my particular opinion. I think what is an incredibly better use case are things like these. So we created a prompt called Deal Coach, which basically looks at an opportunity. It looks at related activities to the opportunity. It looks at opportunity product. It looks at opportunity contact roles to figure out all the people associated with it. And basically, your entire sales methodology and best practice is encoded in this prompt. This is like a 4-page long prompt, so really big prompt. And it's on its 50th or 51st iteration. Some of our customers are using this and they've kind of made it their own. But what you see here in this prompt is it has an action plan because it knows, who are the people associated with this opportunity. It's saying, hey, you got to do this for these people, and these are the dates, and here is what you want to do. And it goes on and on in terms of what it does. I'll show you that in a minute here. But this is the interesting part, right? This is the actual prompt itself. And what you start seeing, this is We are saying, hey, identify and map these stakeholders. So it's looking at opportunity, contact, role. Who are the associated people, right? What are their titles? What is their ability to influence? And the point here is, if you have a high dollar deal, right? You have a $1 million opportunity. You cannot be talking to a summer intern, right? You want to talk to like senior management there. And this is what you can actually write in plain English and say, hey, if the opportunity amount is more than $1 million, then make sure that you have this. And if it doesn't see that in the response, it can actually surface up and say you're not connected at the right level. This is where you want to take AI. This is where you want to take prompt writing to. If you are actually able to bring that kind of blend of business process and business logic into your prompt writing, then all of a sudden we are talking about some really serious capability and revenue impact that we can make for our customers, right? So I'll show you an example of this. This is the opportunity. This little box here is GPT-5. I can select a prompt here. I can select Deal Coach and run it. In the interest of time, I'm going to first show you like a pre-ran prompt. So this is the last response that was ran a while back. But what you can see here is this entire thing is generated by AI, right? So we sent a ton of data to AI. It basically looked at it. It looks at what stage an opportunity is in, gives you its value prop. It's looking at that engagement plan. This is the part that you are looking at. It's looking at how can you accelerate this deal. It's looking at specifics from an action plan perspective. It's scoring this opportunity very much like how we were talking about scoring earlier, and how well are we aligned to customers' goal? Is there engagement? When we send emails, do they respond back, right? Things like that. And what's the risk on this of deal of not closing? It has industry specific recommendations and all of that. So fundamentally, the idea is that you have a fairly sophisticated prompt here that allows you to actually output something like this, right? So let me actually dive into the prompt and show you the prompt that outputted something like this, because you can write these kind of prompts, whether you use AI Cloud, whether you use GPT-5, whether you build your own, whatever you do. So here is what the prompt entails, right? So you can see this prompt, and it has a set of grounding rules. We'll talk about grounding in a minute. Um, and then what you also see is some best practices. You start to see sales stage guidance. So whichever stage you are on, based on that, we can provide some kind of guidance around it. Similarly, use cases for your product or services. Obviously, we are GPT-5, so these are our use cases. And then you can do the same sort of thing for industry specific. So if you are in particular industry, if your customer or prospect is in a particular industry, your prompt can blend in those kind of things. Again, the point of all of this is the sheer amount of richness that you can actually build into this and leverage it for outputting some really sophisticated things that your customers or your employers can benefit. Particularly if you have a sales team where there's high degree of churn, you have new salespeople joining, enabling them, training them, getting them up to speed can take a while, and AI can definitely help by distilling and encoding all your best practices into a massive prompt like this, and basically just output it. And you can see it just keeps on going on and on. So it's a pretty large prompt that does that. And that's what we meant when we, wanted to talk about extreme prompt engineering. We don't want to show you some trivial things. We want to show you how productionalizing prompts is going on, and what real serious customers are doing with AI in terms of taking it forward and driving innovation with it. This third part of this is email. Of course, how can we let it go? We wanted to pick this prompt in particular because one of the challenge I have with AI generated emails is it sucks. It's not me. It's fake email, and you can tell it's fake. You can tell by the sheer number of emojis it'll add, the tone of it, and all that. So what we did for this is I took some large number of my emails. Basically, I ran it through an AI. I think we did it with Claude. I'm like, here is how I write. Figure out all the specifics of Saurabh and how Saurabh writes, and basically generate a prompt with those characteristics, and then apply that in any email that Saurabh is going to write. And what you see here is that prompt, right? It's basically generated out a style guide of how I write. And these are some of the things about how I write. I like to write kind regards. I am very high first name instead of hello or something. So it has a lot of those things built into it. And that is why this thing that you're seeing, and this is actually from our production, that's why some of the stuff is white out here. This is actually how you can get it to be very, very real and very useful. There are obviously scalability challenges if I have to do it for 500 people, but the point is you have the ability to humanize your content. You could probably do it at a brand level, and it could be your brand voice and the style guide associated with it that can drive things like that. Another area is categorization or case routing. This is one of those very compelling areas, in my opinion. So you have cases. Let's say you have email to case, and cases are just coming in. They're getting created because you have emails. Email to case has a very unique problem. You can't really tell what the guy wants unless you actually read the email. So if I have to read the email this person sent and then figure out whether it's a billing issue, technical issue, finance issue, something else, right, and then route it accordingly, I have to do those updates. If I have multiple products, what product are they asking this question for? What language are they asking it? What's the sentiment? And you can basically do categorization on it using a prompt like this. As you can see, this is a JSON prompt, and we said, hey, limit, identify product based on these things. And this particular prompt is also connected to what we call a RAG model, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But the bottom line is, by doing all of this, you are able to actually show that routing, right? When I'm on a case, it can GPT-5 can actually take information from the case, send it to an AI model, which is connected to a RAG model that understands my product, all of that stuff. And based on that, it is able to marry it together and come back with this response. I want to show you guys this because this I think is very, very cool. Uh, Let me go here. So I'm on a case, as you can see, right? It's just like literally one line. What are the top three use cases for Service Cloud? It's got nothing else. That's it, right? Something just came through. And what I can do here is I can just go and say, hey, populate the routing information. And at this point, GPT-5 takes this, takes my prompt that I was just showing you, sends it to AI, gets back a response, populates it, right? So it comes back and it thinks this is a case for cloud compliance, which is one of our product areas, one of our products, and it has the type, it has the summary, it has the language, everything identified. I can now route things based on this, right? I can route these cases automatically to queues. You can have business process around it. You can apply SLAs around it, and that is the beauty of having the ability to wire in your case routing through a categorization prompt like this, because I am able to tell AI to look at everything and identify it. And naturally, the example I used has like very sparse information, but if you get an email that is well written in your case and there is a decent amount of information, this can be much more accurate. It can drive a lot more value out of it in terms of not only routing them but also coming up with a resolution and actually trying to answer the question. We do all of that, by the way. All right, so with that, I'm going to move on to our next one, which is very interesting, which is the surface up prompt. And the idea here is I have an account and I have a bunch of opportunities for that account. I have a bunch of cases open for that account. How do I bring all of it up? I can probably run a report and do that. But the challenge is I have a lot of content, and report's not going to do anything with my unstructured data. I'd like a summary of the report that doesn't exist in Salesforce, because I wanted to look at the opportunity, all the related interactions on it, and then come back with a summary. I wanted to look at what objections possibly the customer may have mentioned or not mentioned, but it can infer from all the content that is on this opportunity. What are my potential next best action, things like that. So the idea is, how do you make sense? How do you make meaning of all this unstructured information that's sitting around using AI? How do you do it securely? And how do you do it effortlessly for your end user? And that's what this prompt does. So on the left, you see this is the prompt, right? We're just pretty detailed, like, hey, generate a table with this JSON data, which is this table, the blue one you see here. And it's got some styling instructions. And then it's got this opportunity. It's got the CRM grounding. It's like, hey, get opportunity name, opportunity ID, summarize this and this, blah, 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 all of that. And the content I'm sending for it is, right, I'm sending some 3 fields from account, 14 fields from case, one from comments, 7 fields from opportunity, 5 fields from task, right? The idea is everything related to this account is basically extracted from Salesforce. We do some masking and sanitization, sent over to AI. Along with this prompt, you get back a response, and the response is what's presented here. So as you can see, the whole intent is how do you take these prompts from very trivial hello world, here's my email, to really accelerate it and actually solve problems that are pretty hard to solve today, right? So here is an example of a fake account. Everything I'm showing is just fictitious data, by the way. So I have this account here, and what you can see on this account is it's got like a bunch of opportunities, it's got a bunch of cases, and I can run something like this account 360. Again, interest of time, I'm not running it right now, but the idea is you run it and you get some version of this information. And you can email this. I can click this button, send an email out of it. You can create like tasks or activities for it. You can copy this on clipboard. You can take screenshots to whatever, present it to your account or QBR meeting. But the point is, you have the ability to make sense of all of this information. And I think that is where writing some really good prompt is so important. So if I go to this prompt here, let me pull that prompt up. Right, so I'm going to just go to the prompt designer here. And what you will see is this is the prompt that we were looking at in the slide, right? So I've got a bunch of things here on opportunity and all of that. And then I have some expected output that I'm telling it. I have some rules around, from a grounding perspective of do this, what kind of border I want, what is my some CSS so that it looks presentable. And then here you see all the information that I am pulling from, from various fields on these objects. So I can bring a bunch of account fields. If I wanted additional ones, I can add them here. I can add like underscore C or custom fields, or I can add standard fields here. So you can see how easily you can just literally go and I can just say, hey, I want to send SIC description, for example, and then I hit save and it will do that. And I can also mask these if I wanted. So I can say I don't want to send my name as is. So I can mask this value to be like company one or something, right? So I can just say company one. So instead of my account name, it'll just say company one. Anyway, getting back to the prompt, this is the heart of the prompting, right? This is where you want to go when you think about extreme prompt engineering. And this is what you want to apply. All right, so moving on, let's get on to the next one, which is, oh, we're done. We'll talk about enhancing effectiveness. So some areas, when you think about prompting, there are additional areas that you may want to consider. One of them is locale. And the idea of locale is pretty much what it sounds like, right? When this prompt runs, what kind of localization would it apply in the output? Particularly if you're a global org, you have folks in Europe, folks in America, MMDDYY, DDMMYY, all of those kind of variants of currency, formatting, dates, times, things like that. You can actually specify those. You should in your prompt, and we actually build functionality around it so that when someone runs it from the front end, from here, then from here, then it can take into consideration the locale of the user. So it will take my locale into consideration and present it that way. If you run it automated, every prompt that we create is accessible through Flow. We have a mass processing that basically can run it as automated. So this is mass processing. It can run it automated. You can create a flow, and any of our prompt can be run that way. When you run it in those sort of automated scenarios, the question becomes, what locale would you apply? And you have the ability to decide that. We've put it in the product. If you're writing prompts, then maybe you should do it in your prompt and say, take the locale of the active user, or take the locale of the record owner, or take the company default locale, whatever makes sense for your specific use case. All right. So with that, I am going to move out a little bit further and talk about yet another rather interesting area, which is RAG. So RAG stands for Retrieval-Augmented Generation. If you were not familiar with it, this is basically a diagram that kind of elaborates how things like RAG get used. So everything in purple is Salesforce. It's running in Salesforce infrastructure. So it could be GPT-5 running with Salesforce. And you can expose all of what you're doing through chatbot. We do that for some customers where they are basically when you're chatting with an Einstein chatbot, it's actually talking to an AI model, but it has context about you, the end user, because of Salesforce data in it. So that's an example. And it also has the ability to answer based on Salesforce knowledge, external knowledge through a RAG integration. So what RAG does is think of RAG as a smart search that's optimized for AI. It can consume content from knowledge articles in Salesforce, from non-Salesforce data stores, from PDFs, from other sources, from your website, things like that. And the idea of RAG is it can, because it has now an understanding of your products, your offerings, your knowledge bases, your how to's, your articles, it can do things like case routing. It can do things like case resolution. So when we were looking at earlier the case that we were trying to route here, right, populate routing information, the reason it worked is because in the background, it actually went to AI, which in turn went to a RAG model. So basically, it got back a response that actually has, some of that information that's coming back through that whole scenario. So the idea of RAG is that you have the ability to basically run it and get information pertinent to your product, your services, and let that drive a lot of the capabilities, right? So you can see here is some use cases and stuff it has, and it's pulling that from a RAG model in the background. So if I go here, you'd probably see a whole bunch of these are all the responses coming from a RAG model. In this case, our stuff is stored on like a Google bucket. So it's pulling it from there. It's also pulling it from our website, things like that. So again, very, very compelling area when if you're writing prompts, RAG is kind of like the icing on the cake. You definitely want it, particularly for support use cases and also for sales. All right. Another area that's very interesting along with prompt writing is file analysis. You can send files to AI and AI can analyze them. This is a very sort of new area that a lot of folks haven't really caught on. We are still thinking very much like, oh, I have data, I can summarize, I can do analysis, things like that. But the idea is that I'm on an opportunity and I'm going to do this ask a question, right? So on this particular, again, this is for Lemonade Insurance. I just downloaded their 10Q. So I can just go here, I can pull this file that is attached to this opportunity. This is a regular Salesforce file, and I can hit run GPT-5. And basically it sends the file to AI. AI processes it. In a few seconds, it'll give us back a response and we can see the response. And the whole idea of things like these is when you're thinking from a prompt engineering perspective, RAG and file analysis are areas where you may actually not even have a prompt. You may let users have a more sort of exploratory prompt, which is open ended, and they can ask this question of like, hey, tell me this, right? Because I can literally type whatever I want here. I could have just said, give me a summary of this report in 50 words, right? And oops, I haven't attached a file. So the point is I can do whatever I'd like here, and essentially I can run this and get that response back. And in the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving. I'll probably come back and look at what response came from it, right? But in this case, as you can see, it's just like a very simple prompt. We didn't really put anything in the prompt. We just said, let allow user input. So as a user, you can, in a very sort of Einstein Copilot style, you can ask that question or any question related to the file or related to that account or related records, whatever. So you can do a lot of those kind of things with GPT-5 as well. Anyway, let's jump into another area that is super important when you think about writing prompts, which is grounding rules. So particularly when people talk about grounding rules, they talk about ethical and sort of content considerations. You can also, the other areas include toxicity, bias, and things like that. So what we have done is we actually basically encoded a lot of grounding rules into the product itself. But if you're writing your own prompts, you want to add grounding rules. You can even go to any AI model and say, give me the top 15 grounding rules that I should think about. Here is my JSON. You can stick it in there and you can basically get that. I do a lot of this kind of back and forth with some of these AI services that are there. I'll give them some fake data JSON and say, here's what I'm trying to do. Write me a prompt, write me a better one, write me a prompt. Once you've written, okay, run it against this JSON, give me the output. Then do that again and again and again. And for very large prompts, it's a really fast way to accelerate and do that. Anthropic Cloud, by the way, also has a console that you can use. And if you guys comment if you're interested in it, then we can definitely do do a webinar just specifically looking at using AI to write prompts. But anyway, the bottom line is you can apply these considerations. You can, if they're literally just things that you can pick and apply from our product. But if you write prompts, definitely look at ethical and content considerations that allow your output to be more fair and appropriate to your end users. Okay. One thing I wanted to cover because it came up earlier around security. So, how we do security is very similar to how Einstein AI Cloud does it, right? Like we built a native trust layer or security layer inside Salesforce. So that is part of our product. And the idea is we extract this information, we anonymize things based on first names, last names, right? Based on fields that you specify, based on patterns like email numbers, SSN, credit card number, those kind of patterns, and we replace them. So we anonymize it and we send it to your AI. Could be OpenAI, could be Google Vertex, could be Anthropic Claude on AWS, could be Meta's Llama. We don't care. Any AI model you'll send it to, get a response back. We will replace person one with Saurabh and we'll present it. We'll update fields, things like that. So here is a quick example of that. I forgot this. So this is the ethical rules and content rules that we were talking about, and this is the locale that I was referring to earlier. My apologies, I missed that part. All right. So the last thing I wanted to show you was security, right? So here, this is the example, right? We extracted this data from case, and basically we identified these email address, and we are replacing them with removed one, blah blah blah, right? And so when we get a response back, we basically reinsert that and replace these with these, and that's the result that's outputted. So the idea is that you have the ability to leverage a natively built AI layer. Whatever product you're looking at, you want to make sure that it has a trust and security layer. Salesforce does it, we do it. I don't know, maybe there are others who do it, or you can build your own. But you definitely want to be sure of what data are you sending and the appropriateness of it to send to people. All right. So that's literally, I think, my last slide. Basically, we do have a LinkedIn group, and my colleague here will share the link to it. This is the link, and you can join us there. We do share a lot of this type of content. You can ask us questions, and if you want us to send you a copy of this recording, reach out to me or reach out to GPT-5. I think we may also have a form that we would post here, and you can basically do that. We'll also post it probably in this group, so that's a good way to get it. All right, so that's pretty much it. We have a few minutes. I'm going to jump into Q&A. I think there's been a lot of them. Give me a second while I read through it. Rahul, do you want to mute and add anything to what was said? If you want me to go back somewhere, that's I can do that too.
I think a few questions I heard. One was that you know uh, we were asked that can you show the deal coach prompt one more time? It looked like a really large prompt.
Yes, let's do that.
Then we also heard a question from Shankar. Shankar was asking how many API calls are made as they all take my daily limit. So he's concerned about outbound calls, which I don't think there's a limit in
No,
Salesforce.
yeah. So yeah, Shankar. So let me do both. So this is the deal coach prompt as you're looking at it, right? Like it's got a whole bunch of things going on here. Actually, you know
So
what?
there's
Hold
a
on.
so there's a lag. Like when you are sharing your screen, it's not visible on LinkedIn. It's taking a little bit of a time.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'm going to leave my deal coach screen here for a minute. I'm going to see if I can find a deal coach document and talk about it. All right. I did find it. So sorry about that, guys. All right. I hope you can hear me. So this is kind of like deal coach framework. What you see is like we spent a lot of time building it, but basically that's what it's doing. So it's a pretty sophisticated prompt. It's looking at the opportunity data, identifying the stakeholders, figuring out an engagement plan, looking at what sales stage it's in and apply that, apply industry rules, role based best practices. And then basically it's kind of doing all of this. So you can see it's a very, very complex prompt. And so these are those things that are non trivial, right? To build something like this, you can't just do this in like a weekend, right? This is a bigger project. It requires a lot of input from the business, from your sales team. What do they think their best practices are? What are their rules? And obviously, this is just our sterilized version of it. Our customers who are using these are spending a lot of time and effort, like really making this world class and align it with their internal ways to sell, right? So that's kind of how we are looking at it. And that is what we utilized when we built this little thing here. Rahul, anything you want to add?
No, all good.
All right. So the second question, which was around using API limits. So Shankar, there are there is, as far as I know, there is no limit in terms of Salesforce making outbound API call. So in this scenario, what's happening is that we are basically doing these outbound calls, right? If I go back to this diagram here, right, the API call is happening here, right? Uh, GPT-5 inside Salesforce calls out to an AI, which does some processing and sends it back to Salesforce, right? So there is no API consumption per se from a Salesforce standpoint that's happening. There is API consumption happening on your AI model. And that, depending on what AI model you're running, on what hosting provider, Azure, AWS, GCP, somebody else, internal, homegrown, whatever you're doing there, that may have a limit, that may have a cost. But from a Salesforce standpoint, this is Apex code sitting inside Salesforce, packaged by GPT-5, which is calling out and getting a response back. So I don't think the whole API thing plays into this. All right, what else do we have? Okay. All right. Somebody asked this question. We are using AI to draft business process map, user story, and other beard documents. Any tips for improving? So, Sheila, I think one tip I would give is I have used AI extensively to create business processes. And the way I do it is I first write like some basic high level 5, 8 steps of a process. Here's like, for example, deal coach. Here's what I'm trying to do. And then I ask a few questions of AI. One thing that works really well for me is I take a JSON of our data here, right? So I can go back to my deal coach here. Let me go to this opportunity, pull this thing here. So I can take the sort of the
Well,
sanitized.
there's a lot of lag between your screens and voice, so you may want to not switch to screen. Just talk.
Okay. So what I typically tend to do is I would actually basically take this sanitized PII removed JSON and use it with any AI model, Claude or ChatGPT or something, and I say this is the content I have. I'm trying to do blah, and help me build this, and then I can go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and after a bit of this, AI can actually rapidly accelerate what it can produce. The challenge with AI is that the person driving it needs to know if the content that's coming out is accurate, is worth using, or is it just plain garbage? It is really sly in terms of accidentally injecting hallucinations, incorrect information. It may not think broadly about it. So, when you think about using AI to draft business processes and things, I think a great way to do it is by iterating it with actual sort of this sanitized data and use it from there. All right. Okay. Any other questions? Looking here. Rahul, anything else you want to add?
No, all good.
Okay. Uh, Folks on the call, if there is anything we didn't answer, if there was things that we should have uh, covered, please do mention in the comments here. I'm happy to do that. All right. Continuing to look here. I think that's pretty much it. Since let me take another second since we have it here. You can go to gpt5.ai and practically everything we discussed, and I think Rohit probably has shared some of those links. But all of this is all of this is here, right? So you can go to resources. A lot of this is in our blogs. And we also have under resources guides. I'm going to open those two. So basically, you can go to blogs and pretty much we did something for higher ed. You can look at how we use external internal data, how we integrate with Einstein chatbot, how does RAG play into here. So a lot of that information is all here. We have a lot of content that you can look at that may be of interest to what you're trying to do. And obviously, you can reach out to us through here. We also have some data sheets and use cases, which are really good if you're looking to get more information specific to Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Health Cloud, financial services, things like that. You can get some data sheets on how we compare with other offerings, what's the ROI, how do we do security, privacy, compliance, how do you think of business cases from a customer lifecycle perspective, right? Those are all the things that you can look at. We have a white paper on how can you think about navigating the future of AI and how can you think about what are good use cases, things like that. So lots of content there. A lot of how do we do things is in your knowledge base. So that's all here. You can take a look at it if you have specific questions about what we connect to, how we connect to, all of that stuff, how we do ethics, bias, privacy, data residency, all of that is here. Our pricing is here. Everything is very, very transparent with what we do. And all of this is here. So that's pretty much it. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll hang in here for a bit. Rahul, you want to add anything?
Nope, all good.
All right. My friends on LinkedIn, hanging in there to see if there are any other last minute questions. Okay. Well, Rohit has shared a link to a form. If you would be so kind to fill it up, then what we'll do is we'll have a condensed version, a well formatted version of this recording that we can share with you. So, that would be it. Also, my one request would be if you have any other areas that you think we should talk about in a future webinar, please do list it in your comments here. I'd love to kind of understand that. All right. Apparently, there's another question. I'm curious to learn to what extent AI can be leveraged to get the maximum benefit in the Salesforce ecosystem when it comes to feeding advanced features and functionality to LLM model. Oh, that's a very broad question, Hema. I would say a couple of areas. One is what you're seeing is first wave of AI. So basically seeing like a surge of I have data, process it, right? I have JSON content, generate me more content, write emails, process it, give me advice on like a sales coach or help me triage cases, route them, do things like that. The second wave is going to be like files, right? Then we integrate with the Einstein chatbot. So that's the third, right? So what you see is two things are going to happen. One is this constant sort of increase in interactivity with AI and different ways of using it. And the second part of this is, of course, just new ways of using AI. The token limit has constantly gone up. Google Vertex now supports, gosh, I forgot, a million or 2 million token size context. And what that means is I can send it 150, or like I forgot, I think it's like 1500 pages of data. Like I can send it a whole book and it can traverse through it and respond back. So as you see this increased context size, there are some interesting opportunities of what you can do. And it predominantly boils down to what is the use case that your customers have and how well can we address them with AI. So I think that's pretty much it on that front. Let me know if you have any other questions. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. If there is nothing else, thank you so much, everyone. Check us out on gpt5.ai, and please do connect with me and Rahul and follow GPT-5. And hopefully we'll see you again at a future webinar. I will be at Dreamforce and so will Rahul be. So if you're going to be at Dreamforce, say hello to us, let me know. I would love to meet you and catch up and talk about AI over coffee. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much.